Welcome to Badger Beer Hour, our first edition. I am here with my friends Landon Cherney and Chris Drosler. How you guys doing?
Doing good, man.
Real good.
Great.
Excited about this.
Yes. So this is our new form show, our live stream that we started a couple months back. I approached you guys about doing a live stream of Wisconsin current news and culture items about the beer industry. I couldn't have anybody better than the Wisconsin Beer Baron with me. So thanks Chris for joining on to this project. I'm really happy about it.
I'm very excited to be a part of it. I've been thinking about doing something like this for a while, and being able to just kind of piggyback onto you and do this is seemed like a good way to go.
All right. And Landon, I approached you because you are the video guy, of course. We've already But more importantly, though, for me and for the show, you're a northern Wisconsin guy. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we've got a really unique scene over here. I live in Eau Claire, so everything west and north of here kind of gets, I think, sometimes lost by the wayside. So we've got a lot of little unique breweries that are really putting out some great stuff, and of course, I'm excited to talk about all of that and be a part of this because I think it'll be fun. I've never worked with Chris, but Greg, I've worked with you before, but I'm really excited.
Yeah, so without further ado, it's time for our first segment. Beer news.
Man, well, you're starting with me already, so that's some good stuff.
Yes, beer news narrated by our beer news guy.
So we'll start right off. Pandemic or not, the Wisconsin craft beer industry is barreling forward regardless. So there are a whole bunch of new breweries and expansions to talk about. First, we've got 3 openings, all kind of related in Milwaukee, and we'll go to Chris for that.
Yeah, so this is kind of fun because there's some domino effects here. The biggest domino is Broken Bat Brewing, which moved from a really small tap room in the basement of this kind of like an office building type thing in the 3rd Ward in Milwaukee, and they moved just down the street a little bit to Walker's Point, and their plan was to open in April, about a week into the baseball season, which Broken Bat is, of course, baseball themed. And we know how obviously that went. No baseball season, no opening, all the fun pandemic stuff. So, but they did finally open in mid-June, with limited reserve seating and all the precautions in place and all that. And this is a super high-profile spot. It's a really nice location, very, very highly visible. And it's one of the cool things is it's got this big mural on the side of the building. It's painted white, and then there's like these big red like stitches that look like the seams in a baseball. Like much larger than life. Very cool mural. Some nuts and bolts on the new brewery. It's a 20-barrel system. With a big tap room, and they built it for lots of. It's funny when you see these really small breweries that finally get big space, like you can almost feel them like stretch their elbows and be like, "Yes, we finally don't have to stack everything up." The coolest one of the coolest things about this new brewery is they built in a lot of room for expansion, and so that's basically empty space right now that's being used for a wiffle ball field. They have an indoor wiffle ball field in this brewery. So very on brand and a really cool brewery. So that opened up a turnkey situation for their previous location. And that's being filled by a brewery called Wizard Works, which opened about a week before Broken Bat. This was in Broken Bat was, I think, June 19th, so about a month ago, and Wizard Works was about a week before that. So That is, and the name and the theme is magic, and the owner is literally a professional magician. The I mean, that's probably his greatest trick yet, opening a brewery during a pandemic. Haven't heard a lot about their beer yet, but I'm excited to get down there and try it. And then the one that's not exactly related, but is hard to not kind of group in with this, is a brewery called Faklandia. This one opened in May, and it's not really related to the other two, but the theme of it is kind of this like fantasy, like role-playing game kind of like imagery and that sort of thing. They kind of create the founders kind of created this brewery as like a den for people playing Dungeons and Dragons and that kind of thing. Haven't had their beer yet, but looking forward to it. They've been open since May for food and stuff like that. This is a brewery in St. Francis, just south of Milwaukee. It's one of the inner ring suburbs, and they just started pouring their beer in, I believe it was late June, like the last week of June. So 3 kind of related breweries all opening up in Milwaukee.
That's awesome. So we'll stay in Milwaukee because there's a big expansion opening for one of Wisconsin's most hyped breweries, Eagle Park.
Yeah. This is probably one of the biggest stories in Wisconsin beer, at least this summer or spring. So Eagle Park is one of the kind of most hyped breweries in the state. Really good hazy IPAs, real good contemporary styles, lots of over-fruited sours. Kind of check the boxes of all the hot stuff in beer right now, and they're doing it, and they're doing it really well. The original location is a small brewery and tap room in the former Enlightened Brewing space over on the east side of Milwaukee, and they still have that space, but they just opened actually they've I guess you could say they've opened it. It's not open to the public yet, but they've begun brewing at their a really big new facility in Muskego. This has the whole 9 yards. It's a 20-barrel system. They've got a distilling operation there that they've been using. They've released, I think, vodka and maybe gin so far. And they've been doing a lot of, what do you call it? Hand sanitizer, that sort of thing. So there's like Eagle Park hand sanitizer floating around out there. And there's an event space, just a really big tap room. It's a major upgrade from, just in volume and this has come with like, distribution agreement that's really pumped a lot of their beer. It started out with just their kind of baseline beers like Loop Station Golden Ale and Setlist IPA, but in their last few weeks of releases, they've started to make enough to pump out batches of like their milkshake IPA and or one of their milkshake IPAs and some hazy IPAs out into distribution. So that's a lot more of that beer for southeastern Wisconsin, and they also have an agreement with Frank Beer in Madison. So that is Madison's even getting some of their beer. This is a really big brewery, and there's a lot of capacity there, but I think the demand is really high right now. So I'm sure they're going to be sticking to those markets at least for a while. Big news with Eagle Park, and they're opening to the public. I believe it's next week. They're calling it a soft opening, so we'll start to see butts in the seats there.
Nice.
They're opening up the new place, you're saying?
The new place in Muskego, yeah.
Man,
this is a place that's had the lines to get, they've been doing drive through curbside service for pre-orders and stuff like that, and the lines have been just through this industrial park out into the Walmart. Like, it's been crazy the response that they've gotten to their curbside. I mean, this brewery, it's hot. People love it.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's good. I'm sorry, go Glenn.
No. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
I was going to say that's good to hear during the pandemic, because a lot of people fear the worst. And when you're at home and you're not out running around grabbing beer, you don't really see these things that are happening at the brewery. So you almost feel like wow, what's going on? So it's really good to hear some good things going on. Okay, Landon, I'm done.
Well, you're speaking of Eagle Park moving possibly up to Madison, distributing some up there. So we'll move up to Madison because there's a pretty exciting all new brewery opening in Madison.
Yeah, this is Youngblood Brewing, which is it's located right off Capitol Square. And the co-owners there's some breweries that start up and you just expect them to get it right. And when you have this brain trust behind it, you expect them to get it right. So Tom Dufek is one of the co-owners. He ran the cocktail program at Merchant and Lucille, which are both right in the same area as where Youngblood is. Those are Merchant is a fantastic cocktail bar, and Lucille is a pizza joint that has a really good beer program and great cocktails. Very just really really well done. And then he also created Plain Spoke, which is a canned cocktail company I've been seeing those cocktails more and more around Wisconsin. So that's one of their co-founders. Billy Duplanty is a beer friend of mine who's been selling beer in Milwaukee and Madison for years. So he's kind of the sales brain part of the trust. And then Kyle Gregorash is the head brewer. And you got a Hacienda right there?
No, I'm giving it up for Kyle Gregorash.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Love him.
So Kyle is a former brewer at Hacienda up in Door County, and I think he was I think he was the portion of the brewing team there who came up with a lot of their kind of more contemporary styles, like their hazies, and which is kind of some of the stuff that they're really well known for right now. So the model of this brewery is more taproom focused. So it's been a little dicey getting started here, but they've got chef-driven food and kind of limited can releases. The beer that they've been putting out so far has been a mix of styles of kind of contemporary stuff like hazy IPAs, double IPAs, stuff like that, and some classics like farmhouse ales. There was a Keller Pils that they put out. And that's kind of I think that's going to be kind of the mode that they're going to keep going forward with. Now, like the story of this brewery is not really complete without some of this. They have the coolest names. Probably like any one of these might be the coolest names in Wisconsin beer. Well, apologies to Vintage. They do some pretty good names, but like here's just a few of them. All right. It's pronounced Oregon, not Oregon, which is a little inside joke to Metro Madison there.
Yep.
Snot Marks and Fingerprints. Right. New Kids on the Yacht. Nobody Makes Me Bleed My Own Blood. The Cold Reviewer is being a dick again. Murder Hornet, and this is the best one. This is the one that's like, okay, Murder Hornet is my safe word. I mean, don't you just want to drink that?
Yeah.
Although it makes me wonder, like, if you're ordering these in the tap room, which is kind of the whole point of this, like, how do you order a Nobody Makes Me Bleed My Own Blood? Do you say, I would like 2 glasses of Nobody Makes Me Bleed My, and I mean, the bartender's gonna be like, come on, what do you like? Let's go.
That's what I would do. And if for nothing else, it is totally worth the untapped check-ins.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You get all kinds of people who don't know about Youngblood being like, "What is that?"
Well, yeah. When I first started, doing these live streams. Literally, probably or not live streams, just streams where I just get on the talk. Like I think 4 years ago, Kyle and I jumped on, and this is when Kyle worked at. Kyle started at Octopi, at least in this area, and then went to Door County Brewing, and then he jumped over to Hacienda. And now he's at Youngblood, and I just can't wait to. If not for COVID, I would have already been there, and I probably would have already wrangled him on one of these shows. I wouldn't call him a good friend of mine, but he's a friend of mine, and I just can't wait to get into Youngblood. And once I get some, Chris, I'll send you guys.
My man,
I got Yeah, we got to jump on the curbside. They're doing it. I hear they're doing it.
Yeah.
Like, you could send me a can or two of Youngblood. I'd like to try it.
Oh yeah, once I get it, I will. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but Billy like works there, and he's like going around all kinds of places. Gotta hook me up.
Right. All right, Landon. What's next?
All right, we'll move on. So, these expansions, openings, and whatnot, they were all in the works before we had the pandemic. So far, at least, the effects haven't been as disastrous, at least here in Wisconsin, as we had feared back in the early spring. So, Chris, do we have any places that are closing?
I didn't think so, and I was like, well, the way things were looking early in the pandemic, when everything was shut down. The Brewers Association did a survey of its members, and the results. I mean, it was self-selected, so it's not exactly a scientific sample, but the responses indicated that if there was no help in if it didn't change in like 1 to 3 months, the market conditions or whatever, like being able to actually open, something like nearly 900 or 1,000 breweries might close, based on the results, which is astonishing. And you would expect that there would be at least some closing, 1, 2, however many closings in Wisconsin, but I hadn't heard of any. And so I hit up Mark Garthwaite over at the Wisconsin Brewers Guild, who's a good guy and very knowledgeable. I mean, if anybody's going to know this, it would be him. And he said that he hadn't heard of any either, which, is really, really good. That survival, that's what everybody's talking about with this. And that's great. But I mean, obviously the story doesn't really end there. There was federal support with the, at least 14 breweries in the state received money in the Paycheck Protection Program. And there's, questions about whether, they would be able to operate in this new, constantly changing, environment, with tap rooms maybe being closed again or not, or, sales being down in the tap room, which is such an important part of the business for breweries. But, so there's still a lot of open questions about that, but, and it's not like survival is everything's okay. Mark didn't think that any Wisconsin breweries were going to be profitable this year, and probably not even next year, based on the uncertainty and just what was going to happen. So that's kind of a tough road for that. One other brewery that I want to mention opening is up in Green Bay. Onapee, which is a small brewery in Algoma, which is in Kewaunee County, right on the lake, just east of Green Bay, is opening a new brewery and a tap room in Swamico, which is just outside Green Bay. So this is going to be they're moving. They have actually moved their brewing equipment from this small kind of tap room thing
Garage.
out into the garage. I think that's their tap room in the city. I think they've got a brewery out in the country a little bit. That's just the brewery, but they're moving. They're opening a second tap room and this kind of new facility in Swamico, in a new building, and that's opening in early August now. So some nice stuff. Onapee is a brewery that had been distributing to Madison and Milwaukee, and they pulled back on that. They were self-distributing, so hiring staff to truck beer downstate, and they've pulled the plug on that since COVID hit. So that's one kind of casualty from a beer drinker's perspective here. But I think Nick Calloway is optimistic about the new tap room and kind of getting deeper into that Green Bay market.
Nice.
Excellent.
There is actually one brewery that's closing, but it's not because of the pandemic. So it's one of the most unique breweries, and it just happens to be in my area of the woods. So Dave's Brew Farm, for those of you that have ever heard of Dave's Brew Farm, it's in Little Wilson, Wisconsin, which is north of Menominee. It's for sale by owner David Anderson. And I think, Greg, you've been there, right? I know I've tried to go there, but it's always been closed.
Oh, so you were really never in there?
No, because I learned later on that you have to really check Facebook, and that David would always post on Facebook when he was going to be open, and it'd be like that morning, like, hey, I'm going to be open today, and you're going, what?
Yeah, I got lucky because we're not lucky. There's a bus trip that the Madison Homebrewers and Tasters Guild takes every year, as they put on the Great Taste of the Midwest for people who don't know. And then they do is take a bus trip to the breweries that show up as a hat tip, saying, hey, we see you. You guys come to our thing, we see you. So we ended up at Dave's farm. It was a cold November afternoon. Dave's beers are excellent.
They're crazy.
You come on it's just, there's no other place like it. So I'm really sad to hear, it's out there in the fields. It's like an appointment only. So I'm really sad it's just a unique place. So I'm really sad to hear it going.
It's a little more affordable than it was before too. I think he had a little over $1 million on it back when he listed it. It's kind of, listed it before. It wasn't as public as it is now. I think now you can get all of it for $450,000. So, just $450,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the recipe
35 acres. Not bad.
Yeah, I mean, the land wise, it's fine.
And the recipes come with it too. And
right.
the brew.
Yep. All of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Excellent, man. I don't know. I would
jump on it, Greg.
If I had an extra.
Yeah. All right.
Specifically to Landon, real quick. Tell everybody why he's trying to sell during the pandemic, but why isn't this about the pandemic?
He's moving on to school. I think he's going back to school for I forget what he was going back to school for.
This is one of the coolest bits of the story too.
Oh, I'm
What's
sorry.
That?
This is one of the coolest bits of the story. So he's leaving. He's going to Viterbo in La Crosse to pursue a degree in, get this, the ethics of artificial intelligence in education and healthcare. And now, I think that pretty much tells you all you need to know about David Anderson and
if you've ever
guy he is in the brewing industry.
Yeah.
If you've ever met Dave, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
So, I've never been to his place, but he's been to Eau Claire a few times with some home brewing stuff and some other beer events. So I've actually met him, and it makes 10 minutes of talking to Dave, and
yeah, he's
a good guy though. Good guy.
Yeah, he's just a different. He thinks on a different. I don't even know if that's a different.
He certainly does. All right, last one. Finally, beer release news. Sheboygan's Three Sheeps Brewing is making an entire summer of its release of one of the state's best barrel-aged stouts.
Yeah, so Three Sheeps is has always kind of gone its own way with the timing of the release of this beer. It's the Wolf, and it's a big bourbon barrel stout, and it's always been released in summer. And this year they're kind of going over the top with it. They've got a whole bunch of variants that they're kind of trickling out with mostly taproom releases. The first drop was last week, and that was the flagship Wolf, the main bourbon barrel stout. It's a 12.3%, I want to say, ABV, Big Daddy.
Yeah.
And this part of it is the release last week was at the taproom, but also went to distribution. So there's a couple variants that have been out in the wild. There's a blueberry version, and then what they're calling a layered variant with coconut, cocoa nibs, and vanilla. So that's the one that's out. And then the rest of them they're dropping at the taproom over 3 dates. And they're all kind of interesting wrinkles. August 1st is the next one. And that's a deconstructed 4-pack of the layered variant. So I saw Prairie out of Oklahoma did this with Prairie Bomb a few years ago, where they had there's 4 adjuncts in it, and they have different, like basically deconstructed cans of each one. So there's 1 can with coconut, 1 can with cocoa nibs, 1 can with the nibs and the coconut, and then 1 that's the full package. So those are always fun, where you can kind of like, try different ones and see how they kind of blend together. This is very on brand for Three Sheeps. They are super into like kind of keeping the drinkers engaged, and kind of like talking about their processes and how they do things. Their tour is really cool, and I was able to go to their Barrel Society party. I don't know when last winter, I think it was, or maybe I think it was last fall winter, and the members only tour there was super cool. It's among the barrels, and they gave you samples of fresh wolf, meaning like aged 1 day or unaged wolf, and then aged 1 day, which is basically it absorbs all the wet, bourbon that's still in the barrel. And then it was, I think, maybe it was just the finished product. So you can kind of taste each one side by side and see how it evolves over that time. Really cool stuff. And obviously that kind of deconstructed 4-pack gets to that point. And then the last release is it the last release? No, there's 2 more. The August 22nd is the Fruit Wolf 4-pack. So it's a mixed 4-pack with 1 can each of blueberry, raspberry, cherry, and strawberry. All variants of the Wolf. And then September 12th is Coffee Day. So they have 4 variants using coffee from different roasters. One is from Colectivo in Milwaukee, Stumptown in Portland, Dark Matter from Chicago, and Intelligentsia from Chicago. So lots of action there. And like, to me, Central Waters is the barrel program. If you have to pick one in Wisconsin, it's going to be Central Waters, for as far as bourbon barrel aging and stouts and stuff like that. But the Wolf is sneaky good. Like, it's as big as it is. It's so smooth. And I had a few of the variants from last year that were offered to the Barrel Society members, and they're really good. I'm excited to see how some of these turn out in the hands of this very capable brewing team. So the ceiling, I think, for these releases is really high.
Very nice.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, there was a couple bombers released too. The raspberry coffee, and I think there was one other one. I'd have to go digging for that. I'm not gonna do that right now. But
was that statewide?
I think those were taproom only.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, man. Three Sheeps is their anniversary party. I went last year. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So
They're
variants.
Yeah, I mean, and that was canceled this year. It's usually in April, and but yeah, one of my favorite breweries in the state for sure.
Very nice.
Yes,
that's all I got for news, man.
That's all you got for news. So it's time.
That's how you sign it off. You got to go like, and that's the news.
There you go, Landon.
I'll work on that for next time.
There you go. And that's the news.
And that's the news.
I am here with my new friend, beer historian. He is a member. I want to get this right because he has a lot of titles. He's a member of the Brewseum in Chicago. Our friend Liz Garibay. I know. Shout out to Liz. You know Liz too, obviously. Yep. He's a fellow at
Milwaukee County Historical Society.
Milwaukee County Historical Society. But the most important thing on your resume, my friend, is you were the intern at the National Museum of American History of Beer.
Well, with their beer and brewing curator, yeah, it was. That was last summer. Thank God that was last summer. Yeah, that was a blast though. That was super cool. So Teresa McCullough is the curator of beer and brewing there. at the Smithsonian. Sorry, I keep stepping on my cord and it keeps moving my computer on. Yeah, right. This is the now you got to have the new graphic that's like dance party. No, but so Teresa is the curator there and for beer and brewing, and so she's documenting craft brewing history in America, and so I got to see her at work and also, do some research with her about that part of beer in American history, as well as do my own research in DC last summer. And like I said, thank God I was urgent enough to be like, I'm going to do this year, because that would have been awful to like have all that lined up for this summer. It would have been hell. So
excellent job. And we got to have you back because you got to talk about what's behind you, because you look like you have one of the coolest beers.
Yeah, I got this. So I got to say, I have a very patient wife. This is our living room. This is just a corner of the living room. I would say half of the living room looks like it does just behind me.
The man cave is the living room.
It's not just a man cave. We're very equal opportunity here at the Harry household. It is the place where both sexes can enjoy time away. As the fact is, we don't have children, so we can do whatever we want with our living room. So the computer is on the bar right now, and then I have a kegerator over to the side of me here. That's my wife right there. Putting her own say into things. But yeah, so we live pretty good. So we got pets and we got beer, and life is good.
All right, so let's jump into why I got you here, which is People's Brewing, which is the first Black brewery in Wisconsin.
You got it.
It's not the first Black brewery in America, right?
Nope. The first, if you want to load up my slides here. I can kind of go through that. So, we'll go. I didn't even keep that one in there. That's okay. So this is okay. I don't know how that one went away, but so the first Black brewery in the United States, there is one newspaper article written about it. It was in 1955. A guy named John Randolph Smith. He, I don't know a lot about him. According to this news article, he was blind. He was some sort of entrepreneur. He came up from Atlanta to what seems like Trenton, New Jersey, and he bought the Colony House brand from Eastern Brewing Company and had his own brewery. I don't know when it ended. I don't know anything beyond that he owned that brewery based on a newspaper. And I've seen a couple of corroborating newspaper articles, but 1955. So well before Peoples was bought by African Americans in 1970.
Okay.
So that 15 years beforehand. So up until recently, that wasn't known. What was known about a year or two ago was what I have here on the slides, and that is Sunshine beer in Reading, Pennsylvania. So about an hour outside of Philly. They were bought by some Black businessmen from Philadelphia about 6 months before Peoples in 1969. And I went out to Reading and didn't find a whole lot there either. So there's a lot of digging that needs to be done on all these things. A lot of this stuff wasn't documented because it was brief too, because Sunshine under Black ownership lasted like less than 2 years. So not a lot that's hung around about that. And then the label on the right is Black Pride, and they never had an actual brewery, but they were a beer brand that the Chicago NAACP was kind of affiliated with. And they, I love that label a lot. But they actually brewed their beer in West Bend.
Oh.
So because there was this, in the brewing industry during this time, there's like massive consolidation going on. And West Bend brewed Lithia beer, was their big flagship beer. And they were on their way to going out of business, which they did in 1972. And they were approached by this group of Black businessmen from Chicago, and they were basically the only brewery that would agree to produce their beer. But who knows what it tasted like? There was never like an emphasis on taste. It was just like, this beer is Black owned, therefore maybe Black people will drink it. I don't know. Like it never came about that way. So that was like before Peoples.
Right.
Then this guy enters the scene whose name is Ted Mack. So Ted Mack was born in Alabama in the Jim Crow South in 1930, and he was an athlete who became an activist. And so he, after the Korean War, goes to play football at Ohio State, and for whatever reason, transfers to Marquette University in Milwaukee, and throws his back out before he can play any football, and gets a degree in social work, and he decides to follow that path instead. And so Ted becomes involved with a lot of different racial causes in Milwaukee, with the Congress of Racial Equality and the Human Rights Commission. He leads the Milwaukee delegation to Washington, D.C. in 1963 for Martin Luther King's March for Jobs and Freedom, the famous I Have a Dream speech. He was there for that. So really important guy. So Ted Mack starts working for Pabst Brewing Company in 1965. This is actually his Marquette yearbook photo. So you can find it pretty easily, right? Top right corner. 1958 is his Marquette photo. The reason that Ted Mack got into all this stuff is racial lines in Milwaukee during this time were really, really stressed. I mean, they still are. As you may have seen, based on what's going on in the country recently, Milwaukee is still one of the most segregated cities in America. So the map on the left is a redlining map. The map on the right is a map of the expansion of what they call the inner core. This is actually basically the black neighborhoods in Milwaukee. The federal government color-coded maps to determine housing values or housing risk for loans in the 1930s, and realtors use that to segregate people. And so you have this massive urban population going in one direction that is massively impoverished. And so Ted Mack sees this, and he has a group of businessmen with him that are like, the reason or the way to get through this and to empower our own people is to become entrepreneurs. And so Ted Mack in 1964 or 65, he starts working for Pabst, actually. They were forced to integrate the brewing industry because of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And so he was a noted civil rights leader in Milwaukee. And so the Pabst management hired him, and he was working at Pabst when he caught wind in 1968 that Pabst would have to divest itself of another famous Milwaukee brand, which is Blatz, because the courts had said that they were antitrust. So, which is crazy today when you see these all conglomerations like most or InBev. The courts were like, no, Pabst, you're big enough. You don't need it. Yep. So they try. So when he was working at Pabst, he found out that Blatz had to go, and so he got this group of black businessmen in Milwaukee that he knew together to try to make this bid for Blatz. And they were part of a huge breweries all over the place were trying to buy Blatz, and ultimately the group they put together was called United Black Enterprises. They failed. They bought about $2 million. So they put a bid up for $9 million and said, "Hey, can we have some more time?" And the judge says no, because I don't think you're going to be successful with this anyway, because you're black.
You're black, right?
Like that was like you got this bid together. I don't believe it. Like, no. So Heileman's out of La Crosse. So you're probably familiar with Old Style, but that's what they brew. And so Heileman's they bought Blatz and produced it for a long, long time until Pabst actually bought it back. And I mean, Pabst has this huge portfolio now of beer brands. So that didn't work out, and the United Black Enterprises and Ted Mack said, "Well, we still want to buy a brewery," because they saw that black people were buying beer, and all that money that they're spending on beer is leaving the black community. So let's find something where we can keep the beer money in the black community. So they move on to People's Brewing Company in Oshkosh, Wisconsin in 1970. So again, behind the other breweries that we talked about at the beginning, but Oshkosh was really white at this point. Of the 50,000 people that were listed in the 1970 census, 103 people were black. That's pretty crazy. So, and they had their own racial struggles that you can, Google Oshkosh racial civil rights history and you'll find those. But People's Brewing Company was this brewery that in Oshkosh, it was founded in 1911. And so it'd been around a long time, and it was hitting the same like stresses that every other small brewery was hitting at this time, where you have all this consolidation going on, and you can't keep up with production and price cuts from, you know, Pabst and Miller and Budweiser moving into your market saying, we're going to offer this beer at cheaper prices. Because at that point, price point was like the difference. It wasn't like, hey, I want like the better beer. It was like, what can I afford to buy more of? And so Peoples agreed to sell to Ted Mack and his business associates, and in 1970, April became the first black brewery in Wisconsin. And so Ted Mack, there's one of the newspaper photos there of Ted with all the cases of Peoples going down the production line there. He had a massive plan for expansion. He really wanted this to be the beer of black culture in America. And things just didn't quite work out for just a multitude of reasons. This is one of the advertisements that they would have put in black neighborhoods or black areas. You can actually find those playing cards on eBay if you look hard enough, just a heads up. But
Cool.
yeah, right. So there's a collection at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, where I go to school, that you can actually see that poster. So they had massive expansion plans, but it was thwarted by big beer and government, and they really just encountered a ton of obstacles in their way. Like the biggest example I've heard and seen is they wanted to distribute into Gary, Indiana, which still has a very large black population.
Mm-hmm.
They did not have a distributor in Gary, Indiana, and due to the liquor laws, they could not get their product in. They were actually met at the border by the state patrol. So, and basically, and I don't know if Ted Mack knew that was going to happen, because maybe he was thinking like, well, yeah, I'm going to do this anyway, and we'll see, we'll see what the man does. But yeah, they were stopped and turned around. I think they eventually got their product over there, but they had this massive expansion plan. At the same time, the taps in Oshkosh pulled all People's products right away because of black ownership. They did get them back within the first year, but it was slow to happen. And then they had all these rumors that the beer wasn't going to be as good, so they sent like a sample down to Siebel in Chicago. There's rumors that they were going to take all of the white staff in Oshkosh and, replace it with black staff from Milwaukee. And none of that was true. And so like all that like comes to a head in 1972. Ted Mack tries to jumpstart business with a new stock sale to try to get some more like marketing cash.
Money,
yeah. And it was too late. He talked about moving the brewery down to Alabama, which wouldn't have been possible anyway, because like legally you couldn't own a brewery in Alabama at that point because of prohibition laws that were still on the books. He actually even talked about moving it to Africa. But by that time, like the loans, because they were able to finance the brewery with a loan from the Small Business Administration in the government, and those loans were coming due. And so the Small Business Administration took possession of the brewery, and by the start of 1973, Peoples was out of business.
Wow.
So, I mean, yeah.
It was how long? I'm sorry, John. How long was People's up and running and running like a brewery?
Under black ownership, from April. Well, they bought it in April. It was like official doors opening in August of 1970. By November of 1972, so it's just about 2 years.
Well, just about 2 years. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Is when they went out. And so then, later on it becomes this, there's a court case that went to the federal courts about the big breweries basically paying off distributors and retailers to like carry their product, because Budweiser and Pabst knew that these little distributors that were mom and pop things could not afford to lose their business. Therefore, they could keep out People's. So beer would just be stuck on the shelves because the distributors would be like, yeah, we have this agreement, but I can't take it. And the Small Business Administration, they, as an arm of the government and through affirmative action legislation, had said like, hey, we'll help you get government contracts, like through the military, because the military at that point, I don't know what they do today, but they bought quite a bit of beer. And so people, after they went out of business, actually sued the government for $1 million to say, hey, we were supposed to get this proportion of your money. And yeah, so they lost because the judge says you weren't going to be successful anyway. Don't worry about it. And so there's all these systemic failures along the way, and like, don't get me wrong, there was racism in Oshkosh and stuff like that, but a majority of the people in Oshkosh supported this because it was a business and it was a symbol of their city, because they had the Oshkosh Brewing Company that made the brand Chief Oshkosh, and they had Peoples, and Peoples actually bought Chief Oshkosh at one point. And so, like, this was the last brewery left in Oshkosh. So they knew they weren't going to have a brewery anymore. And so, sure enough, Oshkosh didn't have a brewery until the Fox River Brewing Company in the 90s. So there it is. I think that's my last. So, here's some news articles of them laying off workers. The thing is like, so there's Ted Mack later on, because that's about an article that he participated in about Ohio State football program. But he like, basically, Peoples was the last black brewery until the craft era. And in Wisconsin, we only have one brewery that has some black ownership, and that's Venture in Milwaukee.
Right. We have 3 diversely owned breweries. Meaning
3, okay.
Not owned by all white males.
Sure.
So we have Lacrosse. I'm sorry, we have Pearl Street, who is owned partially owned by a woman.
Okay.
And we have Giant Jones, owned by 2 women in Madison, Wisconsin.
Well, and then we have, and then Sprecher is owned. The new owner is from India.
Okay.
But he's the principal owner. But yeah, but I mean, just the fact that there are no, fully black-owned breweries in the state is telling of not only the politics of the state, but also the economics of the state. Yes. Because it is not cheap to start a brewery, and it's not cheap to start home brewing or go to brewing school. So there's my spiel.
Well, John, thanks. Thanks for a lot. Thanks for a lot. When you in the museum had that had the people's the full hour people segment, I suggest everybody go there. It's John. It's Ted's son, right?
No, it's not Ted's. It's the one of the other guys. His name is Henry Crosby. It's his son Craig, who was part of that with me. So this is part of the investing group that bought Peoples.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you guys want to learn more about Peoples, and John goes more in depth, and they go absolutely more in depth about the politics and everything. That is up on Chicago Brew Museum's Facebook page. I just looked at it last Saturday, so I know it's still there. It's a great hour. John, we have to have you back on. Actually, I want you to be our resident historian, if you would take that up.
Hey, man, whatever you need me for, I'll do my best. I'm not like, I know a lot about some things. Let me put it that way.
Yes. As I said before, I owe you a beer. Post-pandemic, we'll meet up in Milwaukee.
I like that.
Probably at Eagle Park, because I hear the best out there.
Good.
So, thanks, John, for your for your knowledge, and thanks for bringing the story of People's Brewing to our audience here.
No problem. Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, John. We'll see you soon. I want you to come back. I want to talk about Point. Point is one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite brewery tours in this state, actually. I think it's underrated. Sure. And I just like the history and all that. So we're going to have you back.
Cool, man. Sounds good.
Thanks, Sean.
Yep. You too.
Oh, hey. All right. So we're doing a beer spotlight here. This is going to be just a kind of a short segment to dig into, go a little deep on one beer. And as you can see, that beer this month is Sprecher's Refresh Button. There's just some context about this beer before we kind of dig into it. Sprecher is the oldest of the kind of new craft breweries in the state. It was founded in 1985 by Randy Sprecher in Milwaukee, now located in Glendale, which is just a northern suburb just north of Milwaukee. And it is no longer owned by Randy Sprecher because earlier this year, I believe the sale closed February 1st, he sold the brewery and retired. The new ownership group is a local investment group with a bunch of different people, including Jim Cantor, who's a former he was a officer of some type, I think chief operating officer or something like that, at Miller Coors in Milwaukee, and Sharad Chadha, who's got some extensive kind of business executive management type stuff in the Milwaukee area, but not anything in the brewing industry. So that's a big move, and Sprecher is a brewery that has kind of been kind of showing its age a little bit. I think that their new products had been pretty not great, and there hadn't been a lot of them. And their classic products the classic beers have been really good, and but you can only live on Black Bavarian and Special Amber for so long before you need something else to, especially these days when everything new is what's kind of driving the sales and success of a brewery. So it was really time for some changes at Sprecher. And one thing to keep in mind with Sprecher is the diversity of this company. It is in hard soda, or at least at the time of the sale, it had been obviously it was in beer, it was in cider, it was in hard sodas, it was in seltzers, and it was, of course, very famously in soft drinks. Their regular sodas, their root beer, sold all over the country. Really, that was the thing that was kind of keeping the business going. At least it looked like from the outside. When a new ownership group comes in and they don't have any obvious ties to the company, like a guy with the last name, running everything, there's going to be some changes. And seltzer could have been a direction that they went, and they are going in that direction. Going all in on sodas, dropping beer. I mean, all these things were potentially, in the mix, but their first new product since the sale is Refresh Button. So, I talked to Sharad Chadha, who's the CEO now, about this, and he said that he acknowledged that the company had kind of gotten a little stale. He said that they are looking to contemporize the brand, and he said it had kind of become a has-been, which is, they bought a has-been. That's obviously they're going to make changes. So this is the first new product generally. And it's they're calling it a juicy IPA. It's just 5% ABV, so it's not technically an IPA. Drinks like one, but technically I think you'd probably could put this in the juicy pale ale category a little bit more realistically. It's made with Mosaic and Centennial hops and the blend of the Zythos hop. And the aroma, it's a kind of an apricot. I get a lot of apricot. It's heavily fruity. Just a little bit of little touch of pine resin. As you probably would get from Centennial there. And that, I think the apricot's kind of the dominant character on the nose. Flavor kind of follows. I think, just kind of get the one thing out of the way. There's not a lot of malt action going on here. Pretty neutral there. Pretty. It just doesn't stand out. The hops are really doing the work in the flavor here. I get kind of peach, pineapple, a little bit of tangerine, and I have a personal thing with Mosaic where a lot of the beers that are described as juicy, I get a ton of dankness out of them, and I think that it's probably Mosaic, and it might be just a personal thing for me. I don't know. Do you guys ever get really kind of dank, catty, weed, marijuana-like notes out of your Mosaic beers? You guys there?
Yes.
Edin, Greg?
Yeah.
Yeah. You weren't supposed to be here, so I don't.
You were doing such a great job.
Okay. Sorry. I went a little off script there, but I mean, to me, like, I know that kind of dankness is a little bit of an undernote to a lot of Mosaic hops, but for me, I think it's more amplified than maybe my palate is just a little bit more sensitive to that than other people's. But
no, I mean, like, did you ever have the Emperor when it came out?
oh yeah, dude.
That was, man. I
Yeah.
tasted that beer for more than a day.
But that's like
that's the extreme.
Yeah.
Okay. I wouldn't imagine that this beer would be anything close to that.
No. I mean, and it's just one of 3 hops in the mix. So
Yep.
I don't know how what the balance of those are, but I don't know. That was something I think it is worth mentioning because it's a character that I think puts some people off of hoppy beers. So that is present here. But I think the fruit is definitely the more forward aspect of the flavor here. It is relatively bitter. It comes on, I think I'd say like mid palate and kind of grows and builds to the finish. And there's, I think toward the end of the glass, it's pretty assertive bitterness. But again, it's not, we're not talking about a real sledgehammer of an IPA here. I mean, I think it's, those juicy or hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs tend to be a little bit more muted on the bitterness. And I would say this is kind of a splitting the difference between that and maybe a more classic West Coast profile. So, it just, and it just kind of, I'd say it also feels kind of like a newer style IPA. It's real light and soft, body's real soft and relatively full. So kind of drinks like, like how you'd expect a juicy IPA to drink. My overall impressions of this beer were, the first time I had it, I was like, this is like, Sprecher has, to me, earned pretty low expectations for new products. And, this is a new direction for them. I mean, that refresh, the name is about as, like, it's not real subtle symbolism there. So I guess I was kind of, I wasn't sure how they were going to do with a beer like this. I have not enjoyed most of Sprecher's hop forward beers. So maybe that was a part of why the first time I had this beer, I was like, it really popped to me. And I was like, wow, this is good. As I got further into the 6-pack, I think that the expectation came down a little bit. It's a good beer. And I think it's exciting. I mean, it can be exciting without being the best juicy IPA on the market. I think for what Sprecher does, and what kind of the symbolism of this beer and the direction that they're going in is clearly the right direction. They're not, they're very clear. They're not going to like stop making Black Bavarian. So it didn't sound like they were going to demote that to seasonal. It still performs pretty well for them, which is great because it's a fantastic Schwartz beer. But, I think it's going to be, we're going to see more beers like this. And, I think that's good. It's basically diversifying the portfolio, bringing it into a more contemporary palette, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
That's great.
Greg, you can run it. All right. We have our first ever beer PSA, and the guest for this announcement is Greg.
Hey everybody, my name is Will. I'm a bartender and server here in Madison, Wisconsin. Just a quick insider take on wearing masks at restaurants and bars. I think first and foremost, before you go to a restaurant or a bar, go to the website, go to the Facebook page, call ahead, read the door before you enter, and just make sure that you're following the protocols that the restaurant wants you to follow. The restaurant is not only there to serve food and drinks, but it also has a responsibility to keep its other customers and its employees safe. So if the restaurant wants you wearing a mask when you're not at a table, just go ahead and wear the mask. It's going to be a minimal amount of time that you're going to have to wear it, less than a minute. in total, that when you're in the restaurant workers have to wear the mask the whole time they're there, and they feel a lot safer if you're not walking around breathing on everything and touching everything. So I guess just try to respect everybody. The business is what they want, and that's about it. I mean, Dane County just required masks today for all businesses indoors. So I think just deal with it for as long as we have to, and let's try to not get anybody sick. Thanks for having me on the show, guys. Back to you.
Thanks, Will. Yeah, I mean, it's tough to add a whole lot to that because this has become such a weird topic for people. But I will anyway. He kind of led with the whole respect point, and to me, it's about respect and empathy. The workers at this restaurant who are serving you are spending several hours a day in these masks. So I think, we can handle it for the 20 minutes or whatever it is that when you're not seated at your table or eating or drinking. There's a lot that's still not known about transmission and how it all works. And I think, erring on the side of caution is smart, and, just acknowledge what we don't know. And, what we do know is that, more and more evidence is kind of suggesting that masks not only do quite a bit in preventing asymptomatic people from spreading the virus, but it also protects yourself. There was just a story today, or I saw it today, might have been more a couple days ago or something, but I think it was the LA Times that showed that, even if you get basically it dealt with the concept of like viral load, like you get a dose of the virus when you get sick, and how big that dose is has an effect on how sick you get. And the higher your dose, the more lung damage you can get, or stuff like that. So it's not just about you not spreading it to other people. That should be enough, but if it's not, it could be your ass on the line too. So let's wear those masks, and if it's uncomfortable or you just don't want to do it, just stay home and, be responsible and take responsibility for your actions. And if you don't, we're going to get cut off. This is the price of being able to go to restaurants and bars at this point. And as we saw with Dane County, Will mentioned that the day he recorded that, this is last week, that Dane County closed down bars, and the bar that he works at is also a restaurant. So he's still at work, and you don't do the right thing, government is going to step in and may step in and shut things down again, and nobody wants that. So let's keep it responsible, and we can have nice things. We just have to do the right thing. And that's all I'll rant about that. Greg.
So this is going to be my favorite segment of the whole show, I believe, which is, this is the time where we announce that you guys can text us, you can call us. There's a Badger Beer our hotline there, 608-579-3050. It's open right now. You can leave suggestions, you can leave comments, you can tell us why we're awesome, you can tell us why we suck, you can ask an expert in beer, Mr. Beer Baron there, a question. You can ask an inspiring.
Well, more likely I'll find somebody who actually does know, but yeah.
Right, or you can find an aspiring beer expert here in me. You can find a video guy down there. I'm not sure. I'm not sure where else you can get this variety of wonderful young men to talk about Wisconsin beer. So hit that line. You can text us. This part of the
number. Remember, it's 608 Hayes Boy. That's not true at all, but that'd be nice. 608 Hayes Boy, or
really
maybe diabetes or something. We got to tie it into beer somehow. We'll find an anagram that ties up to that. That ties up to that number. We'll come out with that next week or next month.
It's open 24/7. And you'll call there and you'll hear Landon talk. And if you leave any messages, we have the right to use them on the show. But other than that, I can't wait for this segment because I told the guys when I suggested it to them that it was kind of like reading bad tweets when you go and you read bad tweets. So I think that's what it's going to come down to. But no, feel free to, again, use this as we're only here once a month. We will be here the third Wednesday of every month to bring you the Wisconsin news that we think is important. And if you guys think something's more important, hit us on that hotline. Anybody else have any comments on that?
Not on that.
Well, fellas, this is where we wrap.
Yeah.
We had this is fantastic. Thanks, Chris, for bringing the news. Thanks, Landon, for bringing your voice and your knowledge from up north. We got to thank our guest. He was fantastic. John Harry, fantastic.
Yeah, he was wonderful.
Yeah, and I don't know. He says he's our resident historian, but we're going to work on that. I'm not going to. Right. So we'll see you guys here next month. I don't know what the date is, but it's on our credits. Thanks, Landon.
Yeah, no problem, man.
Any final things to wrap up here, guys?
I just want to piggyback on what Chris said about the masks. There are a million different things that you can do. If you don't want to wear a mask, there are a lot of places that have patios, the outdoor things. You can pick up beer. You can, if you don't want to eat in a restaurant, you can still take it to go. They'd be more than happy to package something up for you and take it to go. It's really not that big of a deal. And I know this because we meaning me and my wife own a salon. She runs it. And she and all of her people and all of the clients, they all have to be in masks all day long, every day. And I can't fathom what that would be like, to get shut down again, to have to go through. And it's the same for restaurants. It's the same for breweries, same for bars, to have to go through a financial lull, or, that's kindly saying it, I guess. Trying to, scratch through not having that extra paycheck coming through. So it's essential now more than ever to just put the damn mask on and let's try to get through this in 2020. The damn year will be over before we know it.
Amen.
Won't that be nice?
Yeah.
And we will close the show on that, Landon. Thank you for that.
You bet.
You'll be able to find us on any of the places you saw us stream. You'll also be able to find us in a few days. Lyndon and I have to work through it, but we're this will be out in podcast form too. So you'll be able to find it in most of the places you find podcasts. Lyndon and I will have more information on that on our social media and definitely by next month. So thanks for joining me, guys. This has been fantastic, fun, and I learned something.
Me too.
Me too.
Right. Yes, I learned. I didn't know anything about Eagle Park at all. So thanks, Chris. We will see you guys next week. Thanks for joining, and we'll see. Stay safe, and we'll have a tagline next month, aren't we, guys?